So what would you say is true in a literal sense?
I would say science. That's not the realm of science. Science doesn't give you literal
that's fine.
truth.
But what is, in your belief, what is true in a literal sense?
For me, as a Muslim,
Yes.
I would say belief in God,
Okay,
belief in objective morals.
on the creation of life. What is the truth in a literal sense?
For me, it is literally true for me that God created all life on earth.
Did it create it in a complex form, or did it create a single organism which then evolved into the diversity of life on earth as we know it now?
Okay, as a Muslim, number one thing, we are told in the Quran, do not talk about what you don't know. So in terms of Islam, in terms of creation, there's a lot of silence, right? For example, in the Bible it says God created many different kinds, and those kinds are immutable, which is why, for example, they believe that, species cannot change. Species is a bit of a tricky issue because we have 26 different definitions, but they believe it can't change. Now, we as Muslims, we believe God created life. We believe that God is the originator of all of the natural laws.
Okay, yeah.
But in terms of particulars about, for example, is the whale linked to a land mammal? As a Muslim, I can't say yes or no, theologically.
Okay.
Right? But in terms of human-chimpanzee relationship, Islam makes it clear there's none.
There's none.
Okay?
Okay, so basically you're saying that it is a complex, so that life was created complex. Because you either say that chimpanzees evolved from a different ancestor than humans did, if you assume that evolution is possible, or you just say that humans came into being as humans already.
No, I believe human beings came as they were.
As they are now.
How you can prove it?
Now,
do you think fossils are false or made up?
Okay.
Can you explain?
No fossil, and this is according to paleontologists.
Of course it is.
No fossil can be shown to be a non-human primate ancestor. All they have is speculation based upon homology. Okay, that's all they have.
Non-human primate ancestor.
A non-human primate ancestor.
No fossil can.
So, for example, whether you have Lucy, you have Homo naledi, whatever you have, it's speculation. That's all you have.
What do you mean by speculation? Like that? Like Lucy isn't. What do you mean?
Lucy is not an ancestor of human beings. That's a speculation.
Based on who says it's speculation?
Okay. The claim that any fossil, whether it's Lucy, Homo naledi, Homo erectus, whatever, is linked to a human being. There's several problems here. Number one, according to atheist evolutionary biologists, paleontologists, no fossil can be shown to be another one's ancestor purely because it doesn't come with a birth certificate. Henry Gee, here at King's Cross, we have the Nature Journal, right, which you must be aware of. The senior editor of Nature, Henry Gee, who's an atheist and a paleontologist, this is what he says. He says to take a line of fossils and to claim ancestry is not a scientific hypothesis which can be tested, but a bedtime story, right? And he says it's impossible to link one thing to another in terms of fossils. Secondly, there is the claim of homology, right? Now, homology, I don't have a problem if somebody says, I believe in homology and I believe in universal common ancestry based on homology. But they need to realize that claim is based on a probabilistic framework which has Bayesian, which is based on Bayesian decomposition with 9 mathematical assumptions, which has conceptual problems such as homoplasy, and they are still further conceptual problems that they have to deal with. So my position is very, very clear. When it comes to science, you can't talk with something with certainty in the remote past. You can come up with working models. One second. You can. Let me complete my.
For a very specific reason. Science never claimed to be the source of certainty, and it does exactly what you describe. It puts forward useful models that are used to generate useful predictions. Now, what's interesting about science compared to where you're coming from is that someone like yourself, if you figure out, oh wait, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make a whole, I have a better idea, and you come up with a better idea, and all of a sudden the predictions are useful and are lining up, then your idea takes hold, and then someone else else figures out what's the problem with your idea. And it's supposed to change and be questioned over time. You're coming from a position as like, no, all of this is bunk. I have my book which tells me exactly what I need to know, and it tells me, which I disagree with you entirely. Islam doesn't say that. You shouldn't question the things that are unknown. On the contrary, Islam begs you to question what is unknown, and it asks you, question, come in from a position of doubt. And you're the one saying science is all wrong because it's uncertain. That's exactly what a scientist is going to tell you.
Sir.
By the way, your zipper's open. Yeah.
Okay. I agree with you totally that science does not give you certainty. But coming here to this speaker's corner, people speak about scientific conclusions as if they're written in stone. And that's the view I'm challenging. I agree with you, science gives you workable models which are then falsified. I don't believe it to be useless. I don't believe it to be wrong. I believe it's the beauty of science that conclusions can change. For example, we used to believe that the universe was like a clockwork, as a mathematical universe, right? Time and space were assumed to be fixed. And based upon Newtonian mechanics, you could say there's going to be that trajectory on this particular day and it's going to be there. And it was there. Then Einstein came along and he showed, although Newton and his theories worked for 200 years, they turned out to be not true in the absolute sense, right? And he showed, general relativity and the background assumptions which were based upon, which were used to base the Newtonian model on, were actually, according to Newton, false. Time and space were relative. Gravity was not a pulling force, but it was a pushing force due to space-time curvature. So look, science, it's the beauty of science is conclusions can change. There's nothing wrong with it. That's the way it's supposed to work. What I don't believe in is scientism, which is to take the conclusions of science and to then make them into generalizations and say that this is gonna, is set in stone. And philosophers of science understand this. They understand that all science can do is give you workable models, and just because something works, it doesn't mean it's true. For example, a philosopher of science in Texas, Larry Loudon, he put together a philosophical paper of 30 empirically successful theories, which were giving you predictions which were confirmed again and again and again and again, which then turned out to be false.
Okay, but that still doesn't change the fact that we've acknowledged that we're open to change. That if we see new evidence, everybody here I'm sure will agree that they'll go, okay, shit, that's a good point. Let's think about it different from now on. But you categorically stated that as a Muslim, because of the book, you will never believe, no matter how much evidence is put forward to you, that humans have evolved from the same ancestor as a chimpanzee or as a gorilla. And that's an example. I'm not even saying that that's truth now, but I'm just saying that you have stated that there is nothing that will change your mind about that.
Okay.
And is that correct?
Okay, two different things here. I just want to clarify.
Could you answer yes or no first and then explain? Can you?
Okay, yes and no. Because
it's not a yes and
no. I'll tell you why.
It's a complex answer.
It is a complex answer. As the gentleman pointed out, the Quran says, "Prove me wrong." That's one of the claims of the Quran. And the Quran says, if you're in doubt, then do this. It has a falsification test.
Okay, yes.
And the scientific method itself came from a man named Hassan ibn Haytham, approximately 800 years before Galileo.
Okay.
He's referred to as the first scientist. Even secular historians like David C. Lindbergh, he agrees the scientific method came from the Islamic world.
Sure.
So falsification is something we believe in. Now, I'm not making the claim that I believe in this book, the Quran, in the same way that, say, somebody who believes in Scientology, they believe in that book, whatever, right? I've forgotten its name. I have to explain my epistemology to you before I explain to you why I believe what I believe. Now, I believe that there are different routes of knowledge. So science gives you a route of knowledge. There is also philosophy. There's also introspection. There's also things like self-evident truths. For example, the world is real and there are other minds.
Sure.
And our minds are
sidetracked.
We can trust them, right? Now, I believe fundamentally, philosophically, if something which is based upon induction challenges deduction, right? You go with deduction.
Okay.
And I believe that the belief in God is not based upon reason, for me.
Of course, yeah.
It's something which I believe is natural and reason aids it.
Okay.
Okay? The belief in the Quran is based upon reason, for me.
Okay.
And because it's based upon reason, there must be things which are testable and falsifiable as well.
Yes.
Now I'm willing if you can show it to be false.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? But what I will not do, for example, is accept an argument of induction and use it to challenge something which is deductive.
Okay.
For example, according to the Darwinian claim, all of life...
But that wasn't my question. My question was, if faced with sufficient evidence on one claim or another, whether it's aliens brought the Earth or we all come from a gigantic purple bubble, regardless, point stands. Are you able to look at a book which clearly states that man has come from a different point than all other creatures, and that book is the word of God? So God, a being which is infallible and can never be wrong. Are you able to, would you be willing to look at the book and even though it says one thing, say, no, this part is actually wrong?
Okay.
Are you able to do that?
Okay, I'm going to give you the answer, but you need to hear the whole thing.
Okay.
And the answer is yes, but let me explain. The Quran tells us in the very beginning that if you can show this to be wrong, right, then don't follow it, basically, that's the meaning. Okay, if you're in doubt, then produce something like this.
Okay.
And it has a falsification test.
Okay.
Now, if somebody proves something, of course I'm going to take that proof. But all science can ever give you is working models. Okay? So nothing in science which is based upon induction can challenge something which is based upon deduction.
Okay.
Philosophically. In the same way, you can't, for example, bachelors are unmarried. Nothing in observation can challenge that, because that's an a priori principle. You understand?
Yeah.
It's something that's not based upon observation. It's an a priori principle.
Yeah.
You know, a square is not a circle. In the same way, the Quran, and for you to understand where I'm coming from, I have to explain why I believe Islam to be true. Because the Quran tells us not to have blind belief. It tells us not to follow the belief of your forefathers. If you look at most of religion in the world today, it's based upon geographic distribution.
Yes.
Hindus are Hindus because their parents are Hindu.
Yeah.
Muslims are Muslims because their parents are Muslims. Atheists are atheists because their parents are atheists, generally. Although you have switches all over the place. But the Quran tells you explicitly, do not follow your forefathers.
Okay.
The Quran tells you explicitly, test this book.
Okay.
And it also gives you something very interesting. It challenges mankind to prove it wrong.
Okay.
It doesn't say accept it upon blind belief. I believe there are things in the Quran, and there are things which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, which gives us reason to believe with certainty this is the book of God.
Okay.
And based upon that, if somebody comes to me with something to do with science, I say, look, you got something inductive, I got something deductive. And even if I wasn't Muslim, even if I didn't have any belief, still what you have is something inductive anyway.
So
it doesn't mean I should change my belief. I can say maybe, right?
So to summarize, what you're basically saying is that regardless of what evidence science chooses to produce, it will never be good enough to change your view.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Any view which is held, even if it's non-religious, which is held by deduction, any view, cannot be challenged by anything in science, and it's got nothing to do with religion. I'll give you an example to help you conceptualize this. There is a big discussion amongst philosophers about reason. Where did reason originate? How can we have lifeless, cold, immaterial matter giving rise to rationality? Okay? Can you get something from nothing? No. So how can you get rationality, us speaking right now, from non-rationality? Now theists like me would say God is the author of all of the universe and of the laws and of human beings, so we are given reason by the creator.
Okay.
But from an atheist naturalistic perspective, there's no reason to believe in your reason. Okay? Now I'm just going to give you the same stance I have is the same stance which is actually held by an atheist philosopher of science named Thomas Nagel. He's written a book called Mind and Cosmos, published by Oxford University. He's an atheist. Now what he says is this, essentially in the book. He says nothing the Darwinists, the Darwinian biologists, evolutionary thinkers, okay, one second, will ever change his mind to make him accept it. That's what he says.
Okay.
And the reason why he says it is this. He has a deductive belief that the human mind is rationally trustworthy.
Okay.
And he understands conceptually the Darwinian claim that life evolved via natural selection to give you survival value, not truth value, and you can survive on false beliefs, is fundamentally challenging his belief that his mind is trustworthy. So what he says essentially is he will not accept Darwinism based upon the same reasoning that I am, that he has a deductive principle which is being challenged by an inductive principle.
Can you explain to me how is your belief deductive, whereas science and the scientific process is inductive?
Okay, two things here. Firstly, it's a consensus amongst philosophers of science. Okay, it's a
Deductive is in every science book, and it's often
okay, so
something that is not proven. Can I prove life created from God?
Okay, wait, hang on. Let me answer this question first.
But then I must answer this.
According to all philosophers of science, science is based upon induction. Okay, so I'm not making a new claim here. And metaphysical beliefs can be arrived at using deduction. This is also well known. For example, me and you, we both believe the world is real.
Yes.
You can't prove it's real using your experience.
Yes.
That is a metaphysical belief which science relies